Welcome to Objections with Stan Willis. I am Michael Morris. This is Stan Willis. Together, we are best friends for life.
I object.
It's early on, counselor. We have a serious matter to discuss, and it's not whatever the fuck is all over this table today. The House bill just passed banning all common guns. And this was being
something like that. It's kind of vague.
Well, it's vague on purpose because what is a common gun? Is a salad shooter a common gun?
I don't know. It wasn't. I thought it was aimed at assault rifles. I thought it said common assault rifle.
It is, but again, the clarification being so broad, what is an assault rifle?
Right.
And we should say this because we never know who's listening.
So the Judiciary Committee doesn't really pass a law. What the Judiciary
Committee, is perfunctory.
What the Judiciary Committee does is they draft something that they're going to introduce, right? Then it has to go through. It'll have to go through the Senate and then through the House and get voted on in both places. And the chances of a law that bans all weapons going through successfully is pretty slim.
Well, here's my question for you, though. Do you really think it's that slim? And the reason I'm saying this, as I say on every show, I am not a pro-gun person. I don't own, well, I do own guns, but I don't do anything with them. They're just for show. Like when somebody's driving by my house at night, I like to show it. I'm just kidding. But I believe in your right to have it. Right. So if Congress, who are not people that have your best interest in mind, want to decide a law that you shouldn't be able to arm yourself, I would think that that's cause for alarm.
Well, it's I guess it's alarming that that a bill that's as restrictive as this one appears to be. And again, I haven't read it, so I don't know exactly what it does. I know that some of the conversation back and forth between some of the representatives seemed like it was a pretty aggressive one. But they just passed a joint bill about a month ago that beefed up the registration requirements and some things like that. So I'd be really shocked if something that's too aggressive in limiting Second Amendment rights would go through at this point, because the last one that went through was kind of a bipartisan thing. I don't know. I don't know if they could actually. I just don't think they can get the votes to actually get one through. That's too aggressive.
So when I was watching, I only got to see a clip of this, but Jerry Nadler was the one who, I would give this congressperson credit if I can remember his name. But as he's reading the bill, he says, I asked the committee, I will reclaim my time, but I'm asking, does this get rid of all gun-related rights? And Nadler says yes, and he goes, wait, I want to get this on the record that you said all guns, and he goes, that's the purpose of it. That's what it's for. Right. I think it's easy for people that have armed guards on them all the time, and then for the rest of their life to decide that you don't need it. Right. Crime is at an all-time high, and good for crime. Right. I don't think we celebrate it enough, but with crime being at an all-time high, and it's not just in certain cities. I mean, if you look in the news here in Columbus, I think we're over 400 homicides, which is double what we were the entire year. We've already hit that by July. So I want to commend all those people out there. You're really busting your ass to kill people. But if crime is going up, the solution is not to take your protection away. That's my opinion. And I could be wrong. I want your opinion on it.
Well, I mean, if New York City is kind of a cluster right now, right? It's back to where it was when I was a kid. New York City was a place that nobody wanted to go because you just got robbed.
Right.
And that was the reputation of New York City, and so if you were a tourist there, you had to be really careful where you went. You definitely didn't go out at night.
It was Gotham City with a basketball team.
Right. It was a dangerous place, and then. They got a mayor. I'm not going to mention his name. And the mayor came in and decided, what we're going to do is we're going to enforce the rules. We're going to enforce the laws. We're going to patrol the streets. We're going to arrest people for breaking the law. We're going to put people in jail when they break the law. And from that time, really until maybe 4 or 5 years ago, New York City was really a relatively safe place because they were enforcing the laws and they were getting people off the streets. And all of a sudden, the tourist industry goes up and everything else. And now, for the last few years, again, they're not enforcing the laws as strictly as they were, and the crime rate's going up. And these things. It doesn't seem to me to be that complex of an issue. If you have the police force, so that's sufficient to enforce the laws, and they're charged to go enforce the laws, and then you have the prosecutors who are willing to prosecute the people who have broken the law, then you reduce the amount of crime. Does it take it away completely? No, because there are bad people. But making another law is not going to change it. I mean, if you try to follow me here, the people who are breaking the laws
already are not paying attention. Right.
Aren't going to care that you made another law.
Right.
Many of them won't even know. I mean, it's just if you're the kind of person who's going to be involved in killing someone or robbing someone or raping someone, you're not going to care that you're not allowed to have a gun. And you see that because you're not allowed to have a gun in Chicago.
Right.
But when
there's over 100 shootings every weekend in Chicago.
Apparently there are a lot of guns in Chicago.
Well, to be fair, it could be people from Delaware going to commit crimes in Chicago and then going back home after the weekend.
Either way, my point is you're not allowed to have a gun in Chicago, yet there are guns in Chicago. So the fact that there's a rule or a law that you're not allowed to have a gun in Chicago.
Are you saying cities that have been known for having mob crimes where people have had large shootouts, that there are still gun crimes going on there?
There still are. There still are gun crimes going on, even though that there's a law that says you can't do it. So I mean the problem is, we've talked about this previously, but from a societal standpoint, our problem is that we're a violent society that doesn't do a good job of really taking care of people who are maybe have some kind of mental illness, and we don't do a good job of we don't do a good job of talking about the behaviors and things that lead to these types of, when you're talking about people who go.
Well, like the lone gunman or something. It's because society ignored them when they needed help. Well, and so they rebel against society.
And we have this very violent kind of, the movies that are popular and the TV shows that are popular are relatively violent, and that becomes part of the culture, and it's kind of I think it's kind of foolish to think that if we just make a rule that you can't have guns, that's going to, because you look at some place like the UK, right? In the UK, you're not allowed to own a gun. Right?
That's University in Kentucky.
That's the United Kingdom.
What's the difference? Same state. Go on. You were making the point.
Same state. Anyway, so in the United Kingdom, you're not allowed to have a gun, right? So they still have some gun violence, even though no one's supposed to have guns there. They still have some gun violence. But then people were killing each other with knives.
Right.
So now, they have restrictions on what kind of knives you can buy. And I mean, goodness gracious, I need to cut my steak.
Right.
But you get restrictions on the knives that you can buy because they could be used in a violent crime. Because the problem is the people,
right,
not the thing.
One of the things I was going to bring up is that all of these violent sprees of shootings and all that, and they're all tragic when they happen. None of them are veterans. And I say that from this point. Someone who's seen violence, who knows the damage that it can be done, we bring them back here, and our system says, okay, you're out of the military now. If you have problems, go to the VA, right? If you have mental problems, you have physical problems, enroll there. We forget about these people. But I think someone that's seen violence understands that that's not the way to go.
There are a few that have had some military service.
Yes, John Rambo, but it wasn't his fault. They were hunting him through the woods.
There was the guy that was actually shot up the Virginia.
The one at Virginia Tech?
Nah, the naval base.
Yes, but that wasn't an American that did that.
He was in the Navy.
Yes, but he was not. He shot up the naval base, but he was not a United States citizen.
Really?
He was here training. He was a Afghan. I forget whichever one we're not bombing at the moment, because we have crossed. This is the problem: is that people don't tell the whole story. Is that shooting that occurred? He was here training. There were a group of like 11 of them,
right,
training with our troops as we send troops over there to train in those conditions.
Right.
That's who snapped off and did that.
Right.
So as soon as that gets out, they stop talking about it, because we want to believe in the lone gunman, the crazy person. And again, does it happen? Absolutely it does. But we never, they always find out, well, this person had written manifestos and they were crazy and their neighbors said they ate the dog.
Right.
And we never, the cops, nobody gets involved. You know what's going on, but you don't go, we should probably stop this before it happens. Right. Was it you that told me that maybe it was a cop told me, cops don't prevent crimes. No. They write the paperwork on the crime.
Right.
I think you said that to me.
That's kind of what happens, right?
So we have the FBI and the CIA, and they're aware of some of these people, and it still happens. These are not as random as we think. The occurrence seems random, but it's like, then they always say, well, if you went back to the third grade, this guy was beating up every kid in the school and threatened to blow it up. And then they do, and you go, we had no idea.
Right. Well, I mean, it's hard to predict what somebody's going to do, and you certainly don't want to. We don't want to be in a society where you get where you can be arrested and detained for something that you might do someday.
Like Minority Report. That's what I was thinking of.
I mean, exactly. I mean, we certainly don't want to have that kind of a situation, because then, like, literally anybody could be picked up at any time and just told, someday, our charts tell us that someday you might kill somebody, so we're just going to detain you.
I understand that, but I think you're ignoring the mental health. Not you. I don't mean personally. I'm saying we all went to school with somebody like, that guy's a nutter, right? And one day he's going to go off. Maybe not in terms of like doing something towards a school or something, but they always end up in jail. Like, I could tell you 5 guys that I knew were going to jail that played on the basketball team when I was in high school, and guess what? They're all in jail for different offenses, but you just went, they were a little off. Why did we ignore them? Well, they were good basketball players, so we got to let this happen. But there's always the kid in the back of the class that you go, that guy is going to be a serial killer, and he starts Apple. But nobody paid attention to him either. There's nobody reaching out to help you when you fall. What's the phrase?
Right. We don't do a good job of identifying things that might be mental illness, or that or situations where people are in where there actually should be some kind of intervention. We don't do a good job with that. It's kind of funny, but you look at like the social services things. You look around and you see lots and lots of kids that are in situations that are just incredibly dangerous for them, and nobody's doing anything about that. But then if I have a friend who was a police detective who's had a couple of incidents which were nothing. I mean, the kid drank something he shouldn't have drank, and they were under investigation for a year. I mean, this is a stable family.
You just made a mistake.
Yeah, the kid just did something that kids do, and social services decided, well, we've got to investigate this, and they just harassed them for a year. And then you look around at the resources that are wasted there when the kid really is a normal kid, other than had a penchant for doing things like that.
But then the system interferes and pisses that kid and that family off.
Right.
So then the kid wants to rebel against the system.
Well, but my point is, this kid, this wasn't a situation where there needed to be an intervention. And you look around and there are hundreds of other situations where, you got a situation where it's a dangerous home. Mom and dad are drug addicts, and we're trying to put the kids back in there over and over again, trying to put the kids back in that house,
because home is where love is.
And you're like, I don't understand this. You've got this perfectly safe house, so we're going to spend a year investigating these people who, do you need to go out, check on things, look around? Sure. You don't just let it go. It might be something, but do you need to harass them for a year and everything like that? No, you really don't need to do that. But then you turn around and you've got the drug dealing, aggressive, abusive relationships, and we're just trying to, if you get counseling, we'll put the kids back. And we don't, as a society, do a good job of identifying people who are at risk and then actually taking care of them.
But do you think that it's also because I feel like we have this kind of top to bottom society? And again, I'm not saying capitalism's right, though it is, socialism, any of that. What I'm saying is, if you're going to be a social worker, you take that job because you want to make a difference. Mm-hmm. And then they go, you're going to make $21,000 a year for the next 4 years. You're going to be destitute and you're going to have school loans. At some point you get burned out because you're not able to make a change. And then the systems are set up. Well, there's not money to get this kid to another opera. So, but we don't care about that. So at the end of the day, when people want to complain about it, the system is set up so that if you're in a bad situation, you're not going to get out of that. Unless you're really good at basketball or rapping or being an actor, you're not coming up out of that. Because the system turns a blind eye to you. But then we as people, if we want to help out, you don't have the resources. I don't have the resources to help either. And so you get the only chance for your family to eat or to get ahead is to sell drugs or shoot people or whatever it might be. Like my mom, I tell my buddies all the time, they always say, do we ever go back to Puerto Rico to see the family and all that other stuff? They all left because there's no jobs, there's no work. So it's a bad situation. You can't go on after 6 o'clock at night. So what is the point of living there? There's no jobs, there's no money. So you come here to get a job. They don't even want to go back because the homes that they lived in are run down, or they got bulldozed to make like apartments because no one could buy the house. I'm just saying in my own family situation, not everybody's. Right. But you think about that, they've become doctors and lawyers and all that other stuff in this country, and they would never go back home because the crime got so bad. Right. And it's not people it's the gun violence there has gotten really bad against people that don't have guns. And that's why I'm looking at it from a different point of view, is that there will always be poor people. I don't care if it's communism, socialism, capitalism. We all think that we want to do better. Right. The system will always push the money to the top. The people at the top do not care about the poor.
No, I agree. So, and I'm not trying to say like there's no answer to it. It's just, unfortunately, I wish people would have these conversations and say, if the government doesn't care about you anyway, they just care about getting your tax money and they care about your vote. But at the end of the day, they're going to promise all these social programs, none of which they can deliver on because they'd have to collect. Did we talk about this? Off the average person to pay for all the social programs. So just take when the Democrats ran last time, you would have had to tax the average American citizen 91% to pay for all the programs they said. That just funds it. Right. It doesn't mean it goes next year to fund it. Right. So your option is, we have 10 programs. Let's just take $100,000. So we'll just put in enough to do this. And when it runs out, well, we funded the program. We didn't fund it completely. Right. We funded it. Right. So the only way to get ahead is to raise taxes.
Nobody wants that.
Well, no, and part of income disparity is a fundamental issue, and in the middle class is what has traditionally, in the United States at least, and in Western culture, a large middle class is what prevents the really the
collapse of society.
Well, really, yeah, because what happens is if you don't have a middle class, then what you have is people who have a lot and people who have nothing.
Right.
And sooner or later, the people who have nothing say, "Hey, wait a minute, we don't like this." But if you have a middle class, then the people who have nothing look at the middle class and go, "I can do that," right? Especially if you have jobs that are being created and stuff like that. People look at the middle class and they say, I might not be able to do that, but I can do this middle class. I can get to here. And so there's a possibility for people to improve. But since the 70s, the middle class in the United States is shrinking. I think I read the other day that the middle class right now is somewhere around 40% of people. Were back in the 70s.
In the 70s, it was 40%.
Like over 60%.
Well, the projection is that 2025 it'll be like 25%.
And that's just what that's saying is that you have an incredible. And I think I read that the average wage in the U.S. for an annual wage right now is somewhere around 32 or 33,000. I don't know for sure.
I think it's 32,
but I think that's what I read. And so essentially, what you're saying is that half of the people, or around half of the people in the U.S., if that's the average, are living at double poverty or below. I mean that's a sizable income disparity, and when you end up doing that, you're really increasing the level and the amount of poverty in the U.S. And if you increase the amount of poverty, you're going to increase the amount of crime. I mean, that's just a statistical correlation.
Well, it becomes the haves and the have-nots. If I don't have it and you got it, I'm going to take it.
Well, and I mean, you start creating a class of people who are desperate because there's no opportunity. I mean, if the middle class is dwindling, then you have this, and this that means the wealthy class is not getting bigger, right?
Right.
It's they're doing their best to keep it where it is.
Well, they're essentially building a wall to the barrier to entry.
So if the middle class is shrinking, that means the lower class is increasing.
Right.
So if the middle class went from the 70s where it was around 60% to 40%, that means that the lower class increased by 20%. Right. Because those people had to go somewhere and they didn't all become billionaires.
Right. Well, it's funny that you bring that up because I was reading about the income disparity thing. The argument is always, so you got Robert Reich, who worked in the Clinton era, and he's always opening his mouth about income inequality. And to some extent, it makes sense. But that guy works 4 days a year for a college and makes $5 million and gets speaking engagements and all that. I don't see him giving that money up.
Right.
But so as I was reading about it, one of the things is in the women's lib era. You know why they pushed women's lib so much? To women's equality, and they should be able to work and get the same job as men. Like not now, but back then. Mm-hmm. Tax revenue. No. Because if Kelly didn't work and you worked, and let's say your household income was $45,000, you were doing really well. You could have a car and go on vacations, all that. But the government could only tax one wage.
Right.
So now if you're working for 45 and Kelly's making 12 and I'm taking a third of that, it was an instant way to get more money. So that's why and I'm not saying that's the only reason they support women, but when you're trying to say there should be women running NFL teams because the average GM of an NFL team makes $8 million. If that woman's making $100,000, I'm not getting as much tax money, but you're making $8 million. I'm getting at least 45% of that in taxes. I only look at the economics of it.
I personally think that women should be allowed to work wherever they want, whenever they want, and be able to have the same opportunity that men have. I think that's a given.
I'm not saying I
do think though that one of the byproducts of that in our society, and I think women are in a bad spot right now. for a lot of reasons. One is that there's kind of this you can have it all kind of where they're being told you can have a career and you can have a family and you can do everything. And the fact is, maybe you can, but probably not. You're going to wear yourself out trying to do that. And so, it's kind of interesting. I think it's unfair, but like when people come to my house, for instance, if the house is messy, they don't say, "Oh, Stan's a horrible housekeeper." They don't say that. They talk Kelly. I mean, Kelly bears that responsibility
because societal norms would be she should have cleaned this house.
From a cultural standpoint. I mean, I don't put it on her, and I certainly don't think that anyone else should put it on her. But from a cultural standpoint, and that becomes her responsibility. But she works more hours than I work, and to have the expectation that she's going to be able to work more hours than I work and still be able to be the responsible person for taking care of everything in our house is ridiculous. But that's kind of the world culturally that we've put women in. And I think it's a bad spot for them. I don't think it's fair for them for a lot of reasons. But then we have there have been a lot of gains that women have made for equal rights and Title IX and things like that, which, I think all these things are probably good things, and it's good that they've been able to achieve all this stuff. But now you have these LGBT plus laws that are coming down where they're where you have transgenders now being allowed to compete in women's sports and things like that. And I think the threat there is that if those things all go through, you're really going to harm women's rights by doing that. A lot of the things.
But then women can't speak up against it because then she would, like you said, that society's pushed them to here. Well, they better get on that same train or there's something wrong with you.
Well, but
they don't win any way in this argument.
I think but if you look at a lot of the feminist activists, Naomi Wolf and some of the others, that they are very much pushing back against some of these things because they're threatening to set women back years in the progress that they've made. How do we get on this subject? We were talking about income.
But it's beautiful.
We were talking about income disparity. So I think how that all ties in is really what we have is we have a situation where we have offshored most of our middle class jobs. We've taken the factories that paid good wages, and we've taken a lot of the blue collar kind of jobs that were typically good paying jobs, and we've moved those offshore. It was initially Mexico, and then it was China, and so now we're in a situation where most places we have a very service based kind of economy. So what do we have? We have a lot of call center jobs. We have a lot of service jobs,
a lot of drive-through window jobs.
We have a lot of service industry, like food service industry jobs. But we don't have a lot of manufacturing jobs, or we don't have a lot of jobs that can be performed without a college degree and this higher level of education and training. And then even if you get the higher level of education and training, there's no guarantee that you're going to qualify for a job that's not one of these kind of lower paying service industry kinds of jobs.
I think we leave on that high note. We've run out of time.
Oh, have we?
But I think the lesson I've learned today from you, Staniel, is get yourself a gal with a gun. We'll see you next week.